Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're diving into how intersex and transgender musical artists can not only break into the music biz, but really thrive.
Yeah.
We're going beyond just like representation matters, We're talking tangible skills, support systems, the nitty-gritty of what these artists need. We've got articles here on education, training, career paths, even a fictional story about a musician named Amara. Really brings the human element into this. What are your initial thoughts on all this?
I'm really interested to dig into these resources with you. The music industry, it's tough for anyone, right? But for intersex and transgender individuals, those hurdles, whew, they're often way bigger. But these sources, they seem to highlight some concrete ways to empower these artists, and that's something I'm definitely passionate about.
Me too. And one of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea of inclusive music programs. The source mentions like the Queer Music Alliance, the Transgender Music Institute. Are those like specialized music schools, or how do those work?
That's a great question. They can be a bunch of different things, actually. Some are dedicated schools, yeah, but others might be workshops, resources within existing institutions. The real difference, though, and it's huge, is they're not just welcoming LGBTQIA plus artists. They're actively designing the whole program around their needs, their experiences.
So it's less about just opening the door and more about understanding what those artists might face once they're inside.
100%. Put yourself in their shoes for a sec. You're an aspiring musician, maybe discovering your voice literally at the same time you're figuring out your gender identity. Or you're facing bias from teachers, other students who don't get it. Having a dedicated space where all that is not only acknowledged but embraced, that's huge.
It's like a safety net, not even just for their music, but for them as people.
Totally. And speaking of support, another thing the source hits on is scholarships, financial aid specifically for these artists. That's where we go from good intentions to real action, you know what I mean? Leveling that playing field a bit.
Because talent, that's everywhere. It's the resources that aren't.
You got it. Music education ain't cheap. Instruments, software, studio time. Now imagine you're also dealing with coming out, transitioning, all the complexities there. Crushing, right. Scholarships, they don't just pay the bills. They give these artists the mental space to focus on their craft, to really hone that unique voice and bring it to an industry that frankly desperately needs it.
It's about investing in their potential, not even just as musicians, but as people who can then inspire change, have a ripple effect way beyond the stage. The source also mentioned mentorship. Networking, which in music, it's everything, right? What's the deal with that specifically for intersex and transgender artists?
So important. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have guidance, connections, easy to get lost. The source talks about groups like the Transgender Artists Collective, the LGBTQ plus Musicians Network. Imagine you're a young trans artist, maybe the only one in your town, and suddenly, boom, nationwide network of people who get it. Advice, resources, opening doors that were closed before. So empowering.
It's that whole thing. It's not what you know, it's who you know. But for some people, it's like, how do you even get to those who's in the first place?
Exactly. And we got to talk about tech's role in all this too, right? The internet, for all its flaws, has been a lifeline for marginalized communities.
Especially for intersex and transgender artists who might be in areas where it's not safe or accepting to be themselves.
You said it. Think about platforms like Coursera, Masterclass. The learning opportunities are incredible. Imagine you're a young trans artist, rural community, maybe you don't feel safe, accepted. Online becomes your stage, your classroom, your connection to people who get you. You can learn from pros, maybe even LGBTQIA plus artists themselves, without having to navigate any of that negativity in person. Democratizing access, breaking down those barriers.
I love that. It's not even just learning music then. It's finding your people, your mentors, your community. It's that feeling of being seen, which not everyone gets.
Absolutely. And this actually ties into another thing the source brings up, career paths. What'd you think about how it talked about both the traditional routes and the more independent stuff?
I thought it was cool how it wasn't like record labels are dead, which for a lot of folks, that's still the dream.
Yeah.
Right? But it also talked about SoundBetter, Fiverr, all those platforms where artists can have more control. Shows how much the industry is changing, especially for artists from marginalized communities.
It's a huge power shift, don't you think? It used to be you'd feel pressure to fit in, hide who you were to please the gatekeepers. Now, showcase your authentic self, connect directly with fans, build your own thing.
And not just individual artists, right? The source mentioned labels popping up specifically to promote LGBTQIA plus artists too.
Yeah. Queer sounds, radical records, they were mentioned. They may not have the huge reach yet, but they give a platform, a place for authenticity. Not just labels, but communities, changing things up. Really encouraging to see. But we got to stay real about the music industry, too, even with all this. It's demanding, can be brutal, which brings up another thing from the source.
Mental health. It's overlooked in every field, but especially creative ones. The pressure's intense.
You're right. Constant scrutiny, pressure to be on all the time, fear of rejection. It's a lot. Now, add on top of that, navigating gender identity, facing discrimination, resources like Trans Lifeline, the Trevor Project, the source mentions those. They're lifelines, you know.
A place to process. And just remember, you're not alone in all of it. But before we get too far down that road, I'm really drawn to 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 story here. The source says her journey as a musician really brings all this to life. I'm ready to hear about her experience. How about you?
Definitely. I think 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧's story is going to really resonate with the listeners. Shows both the systemic barriers and the incredible resilience of intersex and transgender artists. Ready to jump in?
Please lead the way. So ready to hear about 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧. Where does her story even begin?
Well, kind of like a lot of musicians, right? She finds her thing, music, way to express herself. But as she's figuring that out, embracing her identity as a transgender woman, becoming a pro musician, it's complicated. The source talks about her hitting walls, discrimination, even in music education. Can you believe that?
Ugh, that's awful. To feel that in a place that's supposed to be about creativity, support.
Yeah.
How'd she deal with that early on?
Big turning point. 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 finds the Queer Music Alliance online. Total game changer. And it ties into what we were saying about mentors, networking. This group, they become her people. The source really emphasizes how much it meant to her to connect with instructors, other musicians who got it, you know. Not just the music, but her as a trans woman.
Finding your people makes all the difference. Did that help launch her career then, the Alliance?
Big time. The source says that's how she found mentors, but also learned about practical stuff, like the Transgender Scholarship Fund. Got the financial help to do professional music production training? Might have never happened otherwise.
Wow, see? That's what I'm talking about. Targeted support changes everything. Gives you the power to actually make your art, show your voice. So she's learning, she's got her people, and then she releases New Horizons, right? Her debut album. What's that like?
Source describes it as this blend, right? Raw, acoustic sounds, but with electronic stuff mixed in, like her own journey, kind of genre bending. But honestly, what makes it hit hard? 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧's honesty. She puts herself out there, her story in the lyrics.
That's the thing about music. Hits you in the feels.
Yeah.
But it takes guts to be that open, especially when you're already part of a community that gets a lot of crap. Did that vulnerability help her career, though?
It did, but not without bumps, you know. The source mentions she found success, built a fan base, all that. But also, transphobic backlash. Online, some parts of the industry. Proof that no matter how much progress we think we've made, it's still out there.
Right, it's like a reminder that being visible, representing your community, it's not always easy. She's dealing with the regular music biz stuff, plus this added burden. How'd she cope?
And that, my friend, is where those mental health resources come in. Remember, we talked about that. The source says 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 leaned on groups like Trans Lifeline to deal with the emotional toll of all this.
Yeah.
Even when you're killing it, career-wise, got your people, being your true self in a world that's not always kind, it's hard.
Good for her, for recognizing that, getting support. Makes you think, no matter who you are, what you do, mental health matters. So, she perseveres, finds her audience. What happens next? Happy ending.
In a lot of ways, yeah, success, sure. But bigger than that, 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 becomes an advocate herself, mentor to other trans and intersex artists. The source quotes her saying, "Your voice matters, not just in your music, but in who you are. Don't let anyone make you feel small because of your identity. Use it. Make them listen." How powerful is that?
So powerful. It's like her journey wasn't just about her. It was about making things better for the next person. More inclusive industry overall.
Exactly. 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧's story, yeah, it's fictional, but it lights up these real issues. The strength you find in resilience, the power of community, having that support. I think it's really going to resonate with people.
You know, it's really something how 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧's story, even though it's made up, it gets at such real stuff, you know? Like all the things we've been talking about inclusivity in music, her journey kind of shows it all.
It really does. Like, remember how she had such a hard time feeling accepted when she was starting out? Even in school? Makes you realize how vital those inclusive music programs are, the ones we talked about. They can be that safe space, especially for artists who need that extra level of understanding.
Totally. And then later on, when she finds success, It's because of mentors, opportunities like that scholarship fund.
Mhm.
Proves those things actually work. Like, it's not just talk, it's giving people the tools to actually make it.
Exactly. And the thing about her using the internet, how it was both good and bad, that's fascinating too, right?
Yeah. Like, yeah, there was the negativity, the backlash. We can't forget about that. But those online spaces were also how she found her community, those resources like the Queer Music Alliance. It's almost like for folks who might not have that support in their town, online is even more important.
Absolutely. And even her career path, it's like she embodied that shift we talked about. Yeah, she had some mainstream success, but becoming an advocate,
Yeah.
a mentor herself, using her platform to help others. That says a lot about where the industry's going.
Yeah, like she's almost creating her own version of those LGBTQIA plus record labels. It's not enough to just be seen. You got to make room for other voices too. Man, this whole deep dive has been kind of mind-blowing. We started asking, how can these artists thrive?
Mm.
And it turns out there's no one answer, right? It's education, resources, mentors, safe spaces online and off, and a whole lot of guts.
You got it. It's about changing the whole system, really. Less gatekeeping, more real inclusivity. We're not there yet, but stories like Amara's, they give you hope. Like, here's one way we can get there.
It's inspiring, really. If there's one thing I hope people listening take away from this, it's that your voice matters. Whether you're making music, telling your story, or just being there for someone who needs it, don't underestimate what you can do. Even small actions can make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Your voice matters, and so does your choice to listen to others.
Thanks for coming on this deep dive with us, everyone, into the world of intersex and transgender musicians. We hope this got you thinking. What really stuck with you? What questions do you still have? Keep those conversations going. Check out these amazing artists, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a whole new topic.